This video provides an overview of using RStudio. By the end of this video, you should understand how RStudio makes using R easier, what each section of the RStudio dashboard contains and how you interact with it, and the major file types that are used by RStudio and what each is used for. If you remember from when we installed RStudio, it's a front end for R. It provides a graphical user interface for R, an easy-to-use summary of your R environment, file viewers and editors, and access to help files. If you remember, you need RStudio to run on top of R because R itself provides the computing engine. So let's take a tour of RStudio. The RStudio dashboard is usually divided into 4 sections. What you see on my screen here only has 3 sections. The first time you run R, there's nothing open in the editor window, and so what I'm going to do initially is just open a text file in the editor window to get the standard 4-pane layout. I can do that by selecting from the File menu, New File, and then R Script. So you now see that I have 4 windows, or 4 panes, open in the R environment. So what are each of the areas in the RStudio dashboard used for? We'll start with the upper left-hand corner. This is the editor. It allows you to edit, type in, and run R commands using text in the window. You can also show and edit the content of .r and .rmd files. We'll talk about what those are at the end of this video. Moving down to the lower left, this is the R console. This is exactly the same as the R interface you saw in the command prompt, except it's contained in a window in the graphical user interface. You can type commands in at the prompt at the bottom. R will process the input and provide output for you. So let's say, for example, that I'd like to know what 2 plus 2 is. I can type this into the console window, press enter, and R gives me the result. This is a nice way to run commands one at a time, but in general, you want to have an entire series of commands, and if that's the case, you type many of them in the editor window above, select all of them, and then press the run button to have them run in sequence in this window. Let me show you that as an example. When you write R scripts, you'll type them in this text window, one command on each line. So, for example, if I would like to know what 2 plus 2 is and what 4 plus 4 is, I can type them in this window, putting a line in between each. After I've typed in all of the commands that I want to run, I can highlight them and press the run button, and the output shows up in the console window at the bottom. There's a lot more you can do with these 2 windows. We'll cover a lot of that down the road. Moving to the window in the upper right-hand corner, this is your Environment Explorer. In the default view, when you have the Environment tab selected, it shows you the current state of your R environment. Files that you have loaded, variables that you've defined, and so on will be listed here, and you can explore them more by clicking on them. The other tabs, for example, History, shows you the list of commands that have been run in the past in this R session. The Connections tab will show you internet connections, and the Tutorial provides some tutorials if this is something you're interested in. Lastly, in the lower right-hand corner, we have the Viewer. This is a very handy component of RStudio. It allows you to view files that are not text files, so for example, image files or graphs. It has a plot section for plots that you've generated in R. There's a packages section that details the packages that are installed and loaded on your system. Importantly, and someplace you'll spend a lot of time, I know I do, is the Help section that provides documentation for all of the commands that are available in R. So in the Help tab, you can type in the name of a command in the search window. In this case, I'm going to look up help on the print command. Print in the window, press enter, and it pulls up the help file for the print function. Lastly, there's the Viewer tab that allows you to view things that aren't plots or files. As I showed you, in the editor window, which was the upper left-hand window of RStudio, you can enter a series of text commands separated by new lines, and R would execute those commands one after another. This is the general way that you'll interact with R in RStudio. You'll write out a series of commands in these text files. You can save them, open them later, edit them, and make changes. And when you're ready to run them, you'll highlight the code that you want to run and press the run button. This is exactly the same as entering all of those commands one at a time in the console, but it allows you to go back, make changes, and edit much more easily. So let me show you how this works in practice in RStudio. I've prepared a script ahead of time, and what I'm going to do is open it up in the editor, take a look at it, and run it. To find the file that I prepared ahead of time, I can go to File, Open File, enter the file name, and the full path to the file. And when I open it, the text of that file shows up here. Don't worry too much about the text that you see in here. This is a pretty complicated program, but that's the important reason that we save these things in .r files, because it allows us to do complicated things and not have to type them out line by line in the console. So just scrolling through this file, you can see that it's relatively long. There are maybe 60 or 70 lines of code in here. There's a bunch of commands that you may not recognize now, but hopefully you will by the end of the class. But what I would like to do with this code is actually have it do something. So again, I can highlight all of the code that I would like to run. Here, I'll just start at the beginning, go all the way down to the end, and then press the run button. And what you can see is in the console, these commands are being run one at a time. And then finally, if you look in the plots section of the display, you can see that it's generated a map. That's what this code was designed to do, was actually to map air quality monitors in the United States, and these red dots show the locations of all of those monitors. So again, typing all of these commands out one at a time could be a tedious process, and that's why we use script files to store all of the commands in the order we'd like them to be run in. Plus it has the added benefit that if you ever make a mistake or there isn't something that's quite right, it's very easy to go back, edit a small part of it, and then you can rerun everything from the beginning to get new and corrected results. So you can see in that file menu that RStudio opens several different types of files. You can identify each of these files by their file extension or the text that comes after the dot in the file name. There's a couple of important files, and I'll go over those right now. The first is a .r file. This is an R script file. It's a text file containing a series of R commands. The nice thing about these files is, again, they're a detailed and unambiguous set of instructions for R to follow. You're generally going to edit the .r files and run all of the commands from start to finish using RStudio. These scripts can do basically anything that R can do. They can read data, perform calculations, generate output, including files and images. Frequently, I'll call these scripts programs. Those terms are interchangeable. These files are always going to open in the editor, or that upper left-hand pane. The second type of file is a .r data file. This is an R workspace file. You might remember .r data because I told you to set R so it would not automatically save .r data when it exits. And if you remember, what it was doing was saving an entire copy of the current state of your R session and then reloading it when you reopened RStudio, which is generally not something you want to do for reproducibility. But that's exactly what an R data file is. It's a data file that contains a copy of your entire R session. It's a great way to save everything that you have done in this session. It doesn't necessarily need to be the .r data file. You can actually put text before the dot. So if there's some instance where you would like to save your entire R session, you would do that using .r data. Another important file type for saving information in R is the .rds file. This is an R object file. As opposed to a .r data file, a .rds file contains a copy of only a single R object. Objects can be almost anything. They could be a single number. They could be a table of data. That's something like an Excel spreadsheet. They could be a graph, an audio clip. Basically anything that R thinks of as electronic data can be stored in an RDS file, but only one thing at a time. Importantly, when you load RDS files, you need to tell R what to do with them because they're just a single piece of information. That means you can't load these files by double-clicking on them. You always have to open them up using special commands in R. I think it's important just to think for a minute about the difference between an R data and an RDS file. So an R session or an R data file is like a workshop. Saving an R data file is like saving a copy of the whole workshop. Everything that you've made in that workshop, all of the tools, the sawdust on the floor, everything. Saving an RDS file is just like saving one thing from your workshop, maybe one thing that you've made or one particular tool. Clearly, that's going to save you some space because you're only saving one thing as opposed to a bunch of things. But it's also less confusing to anyone that reads the file later. When they look at an RDS file, there's only one thing inside of it, so it's very easy for them to tell what's going on, whereas an R data could be your very disorganized workshop. The last type of file that I'll mention here is an RMD file, which is an R markdown file. We'll talk about these more in a couple of sections, but a markdown file is a text file that combines R script code with a markup language. And what that allows you to do is generate documents along with running R commands. This is a very nice way to generate dynamic documents that update automatically when you get new data. RStudio has a special tool called Knitter that reads R markdown documents and generates either a Microsoft Word document or a PDF document, translating all of the R code and markup into something that would be put into the text document. Again, RMD files are going to be loaded in the editor, and we'll talk extensively about how you would actually generate those down the road.